So it's the last panel, and I'm glad to see that we're still full. I know that it's a challenge, especially for our Turkish group members. Most of them have arrived yesterday, and I think the jet lag must be kicking in around these times. So I'm especially happy to see them awake. And it's also good to see that this panel is mostly dominated by women. So I think it's the first one today. So I want to thank the Aspen Institute, especially for hosting this event, and all of the personnel at the Aspen Institute, but especially Anna and Sarah, who patiently answered all our emails and phones on a timely manner, for being so organized and on top of everything. So thank you. And also I want to thank Gabe, who we coordinated this event with last year, but I know that he was very much still involved, even though he is at the U.S. Chamber of Commerce right now. Still, thank you. I'm not going to go into detail introducing my organization. All of the information is available in the bios. Just to mention that I'm representing two organizations, the Union of Chambers and Commodity Exchanges of Turkey and Foreign Economic Relations Board. So I'm not going to go into details explaining them, but just to mention for our American colleagues who might not know these two organizations well, TOBB is the umbrella organization representing all the chambers of commerce, industry, as well as the commodity exchanges, and it's a different system than the U.S. In the sense that in Turkey it's compulsory membership to the chambers, and in that sense TOBB represents all the firms, no matter what their size or sectors are. It has around 1.3 million companies as its members. Through the local chambers of commerce and industry that these companies are part of. There are approximately 364 local chambers of commerce and industry in Turkey. And DEİK, the other organization, is based in Istanbul, and it's mostly organized through the business councils. There are more than 100 business councils under DEİK. And we're happy that this event is happening as part of a really concrete outcome of the PMB Turkey local chapter in coordination with the PMB Secretariat here at Aspen. So it's good to see a concrete outcome of it. Let me introduce our panelists. As you see, we have a full panel. And as we did in the other panels, I'm first going to introduce all of the speakers. Our first speaker will be Maryruth Coleman, who is the Director for the Office of Southern European Affairs at the U.S. Department of State. Maryruth joined the Office of Southern Europe in August 2012, and prior to that she served as Director of the Office of Economic Policy and Public Diplomacy in the Bureau of Economic and Business Affairs, and as the Chief of Staff to the Assistant Secretary of Economic Affairs. And she was also the Deputy Chief of Mission at the U.S. Embassy in Slovenia during 2005 to 2008, including 10 months as Chargé d'Affaires during Slovenia's EU presidency. She has various previous diplomatic and domestic assignments, some of which include being the Deputy Director of the Office of Nordic and Baltic Affairs, being the Senior Political Officer in the Office of European Union Affairs, as well as Political Economic Counselor in Latvia, and Special Assistant to the Undersecretary of Economic Affairs. These are only some of them. As someone who also is doing her PhD, I don't want to omit your academic achievements as well. I know how much it takes, how much dedication and time it takes. So you hold a doctorate in political science and East Asian studies from Harvard University and an MA in East Asian studies from Stanford. And you also did some doctoral research in China. Our second speaker is going to be Emirhan Yorulmazlar, who is a political counselor at the Embassy of Turkey. Emirhan is the one that's well known by all of the business organization people here in DC. He's the one that who is answering our questions and emails, mostly dealing with economy-related issues. He joined the Turkish embassy here in DC in August 2012, and he previously served as the Deputy Special Advisor and Deputy Chief of Staff to the Minister of Foreign Affairs, Ahmet Davutoğlu. Emirhan was third and second secretary at the Turkish embassy in Tehran between 2005 and 2009. And he's also currently Foreign Policy Institute Fellow at SAIS, Johns Hopkins. And he was formerly a fellow at the Weatherhead Center for International Study at Harvard University. He has his majors in political science, IR, and history from Boğaziçi University, the MIT in my field in Istanbul. And he got an MS in European Politics and Policy at London School of Economics. He has an academic side as well. He's currently also doing his PhD at Boğaziçi University. And he's completing his dissertation on ideas and foreign policy, the role of Justice and Development Party, Davutoğlu paradigm in Turkish foreign policy after 2002. So if you're interested in this topic, to go find him during the breaks. Our third speaker is Ambassador Holmes, Jim Holmes, and he's the president and CEO of American-Turkish Council. I had the privilege to work closely with him recently as part of my role in DEIC, because ATC and DEIC are working very closely together in organizing these annual events, annual conferences on Turkey. And I especially enjoyed attending their latest annual conference on Turkey. There were really good presentations that were done during each panel, and my favorite was the agriculture panel, which was very concrete in terms of the effects of a transatlantic trade partnership agreement between EU and US, its potential effects on Turkey and on specific sector of agriculture. And this is only one of the panels, and it's possible to find presentations of some of the speakers that shared their PowerPoints on the ATC website. So I do encourage you to look at their website.
Skip all the rest of it.
Okay. Okay, and Sule Akyuz is the international trade lawyer at Arent Fox. Her practice focuses on international trade and business matters. And she has a broad range of experience in customs, generalized system of preferences, trade policy, etc. And she's also the representative of TOBB AmCham, Turkish American Business Association here in DC. And one important thing about Sule is before coming to US, she also practiced law in Turkey for more than a decade, both as a private practitioner and as in-house counsel for various companies and financial institutions. And our last speaker is going to be Christine Najdi, who is the Senior Turkey Desk Officer, International Trade Administration at the US Department of Commerce. She specifically monitors the US economic and commercial policy in Turkey, Slovakia, and Croatia, and assists US companies having issues or difficulties in these markets. And she prepares briefings for senior commerce officials and provides trade policy recommendations on assigned countries. A lot of information. I mean, she also has some private sector background, so it might be interesting to our business people from Turkey as well. During 2001 to 4, she worked for a corporation in Rockville on IT company producing international trade facilitation software. And more of the information about the bios is in the folder. So let's get started with the questions, maybe with Maryruth. If it would be possible for you to evaluate a little bit for us the significance of the US-Turkey relations, especially considering your long history at the State Department. Also, if you can touch upon how this significance has changed over the years and how you see it today.
Thank you. Thank you. It's a really delight to be here today. And of course, I'm privileged to be talking about an extremely important ally of the United States. A relationship that has been growing and is very successful and certainly the focus of the President and the Secretary of State on almost a daily basis. I came into the office, as was said, last summer, and right then the United States was immensely accelerating its cooperation with Turkey on Syria. Syria was posing a threat in terms of possible incoming weaponry, terrorists, attacks, and tens of thousands of refugees. So during the entire fall, I saw the intense focus by all of the senior U.S. officials, military, state, et cetera, across the board on seeing what we could do to work with Turkey to deal with this humanitarian challenge, and also to cooperate in trying to shape the developments in the Middle East, particularly how to support the fledgling Syrian opposition. And that brought us so close to so many Turkish officials in working with opposition leaders, trying to understand them and collaborate in trying to train them and have them focus on the eventual building of a free and democratic Syria. We, of course, by the fall and winter, we're putting in Patriot missiles, and this again very much tightened our military-to-military cooperation and was a physical demonstration of our commitment to Turkey's defense and the important place it plays in the NATO alliance. Other key issues that have arisen that are at the top of our agenda would be, for example, counterterrorism. Both Turkey and the United States have suffered terrorist attacks. Turkey is situated in a challenging environment, if I might say that, or a challenging neighborhood. And so we have been very interested in developing closer ties and better cooperation with the government on the types of challenges, whether it's terrorist financing or the types of people who might try to use Turkey's territory to move themselves and other resources to places where fighting is going on. And so that's been very important to us and to Turkey to preserve public order and safety and to curtail those who would threaten our societies. Beyond that, of course, any number of regional issues we work very closely on, Middle East peace. We're working to improve, again, Turkey's relations with Israel, and that can have so many effects, both strategically, but also on economic development possibilities. We work closely on Iraq, a country with that we both want to preserve as a unified country and that has enormous energy potential. Also, other long-standing issues such as Cyprus and Armenia. So everyone across the national security structure, and then of course to the issues we care about too very much here, economics, trade, every senior person is engaged. The culmination of the relationship this year came with the visit of Prime Minister Erdogan. It was one of the most senior type meetings we could put on with all of the bells and whistles, and not only a meeting with the president, but a private dinner, a huge luncheon hosted by the Vice President and Secretary of State for the visiting party. And at that time, all of the most senior and sensitive issues could be discussed between the two sides, and a lot of progress made in our mutual understanding and ideas on how to go forward. Of course, not long after the visit ended, of course, we've seen some protests in the streets. That has again brought a great deal of attention, not only from the government, but many non-governmental organizations in the press, and so it's been certainly in the media a lot. But the ambassador just yesterday met with senior leaders, and our secretary has said that we believe in Turkish democracy. We believe in our partnership. We believe in all the changes and strengthening that has been done in Turkey, and we have just tried to work with our partners to urge a democratic dialogue and recommitment to make sure that the freedom of expression is observed, because of course this enshrines Turkey's success as a democratic country, its model for other countries in the region, and of course a well-functioning democracy is the foundation for the kind of advanced economic development and economy that Turkish citizens all want. So that is the overview
Thank
of the
you.
political.
And considering that most of the people today in this room are businessmen, economy-related people, would you be able to touch upon a little bit more in detail what the State Department does, especially in promoting bilateral trade and investment?
Yes. Well, as the Chief of Staff to Assistant Secretary Fernandez, and then in my current job, I was fortunate to participate in a couple of the sessions of the Economic Partnership Commission, and to see the kind of very rich and robust dialogue that is going on between government colleagues. And of course, we have the government-to-government organizations, the FSEC, the EPC, an upcoming dialogue or discussion on trade. And then, of course, the private sector has also very rich collaboration in terms of U.S.-Turkey Business Council, the U.S. Chamber partnerships with the TOBB, et cetera. So these are hallmarks of a very rich economic relationship that doesn't, believe me, does not exist with a lot of countries that we recognize and have good relations with. It's emblematic of our recognition of Turkey's rapid growth and its enormous potential for the future, its dynamic present. So our priorities, of course, are to increase trade and investment bilaterally. We are great believers that trade and investment are ways to find our ways out of recession, out of economic hard times, build good new jobs for our people. And so a lot of our dialogue is focused, how do we do that? We also want to work with the private sector more directly to make known to each the kinds of opportunities that exist in each other's countries. For the U.S. government, when we're talking with our counterparts, we promote stronger IPR, intellectual property protection regimes, and transparent business regulations to foster innovation and make it easier for our private sector to operate in Turkey. We promote entrepreneurship, science and tech collaboration. And this is all in furtherance of a more advanced economy. We support U.S.-Turkey economic cooperation in third countries, especially the Arab Spring countries, because there we each bring important things to the table. You have the knowledge of the region, we bring certain experiences, and in that way we can build new markets, new partners, new economic growth in areas that now have potential for instability because of high unemployment. So we're through also ASPEN, we are those kinds of integration with companies, but also with private sector NGOs. We also want to promote good governance, improvements in public finance, and on development of small and medium-sized enterprises as ways forward, both for business and for the general political stability of the region. That's a general
Thank you,
summary.
Maryruth.
Certainly.
Emirhan, would you be able to share with us your take on the current situation in like economic and commercial relations between Turkey and the U.S.?
Thank you, Neslihan. Thank you for inviting me. Actually, this is a delightful panel. With Turkey, I think in the U.S., the Turkish-U.S. relationship, we have many kind of positive news these days. One of them is many countries are trying to attract the U.S. attention. I mean, from Germany to Europe to Japan to everybody. I mean, in the morning when you are listening to NPR, the German embassy is just promoting their idea of coming and cooperating with the United States. But for Turkey, we are always getting that attention. And in terms of our economic relations, I think these days it's easier to talk about Turkish economy and the success of Turkish economy. And this is of course has been reflected in the current level of our cooperation with the United States. If you look at the figures, I mean the figures are also telling. I mean since 2000 our trade volume was almost tripled, and in the last just 4 years it has doubled right after President Obama's inauguration. US has been one of the biggest foreign investors in Turkey right after Netherlands and Austria. It has almost invested $8.5 billion in the last decade, and we now have almost a million American tourists visiting Turkey, and the Turkish Airlines is having direct flights to Houston and Los Angeles in addition to New York and Washington DC. And as Maryruth already underlined, we have different channels of consultations at the private level. We have FSEC, which is a cabinet level and consultory mechanism. Also we have EPC and TIFA, which are working towards resolving emerging issues in our commercial and economic relations. And there is also a increasing investment in Turkey, increasing interest in Turkey to invest in the United States. I mean, most of our businessmen are visiting here to find ways to enter the US market. Although there are some problems because of the complexity of conditions of entry into the US market, still I think there is a surge in the idea of investing in the US. So overall there is a positive atmosphere in our relations, and another asset, as Maryruth already underlined, there is third country cooperation, which is an emerging and important mechanism for cooperating with United States, because Turkey's economic access to developing markets from the Middle East to Balkans, Caucasia and Central Asia is an important asset, and the US firms are very much willing to enter into a cooperative relationship with Turkey. I think against this backdrop, our belief is there is ample ground for further cooperation between our countries, and our economic relations has not yet made up to its full potential. Turkey's rising role in the global economy would entail a reinforced engagement both at the public and private levels, and Turkey's openness to business, updated legal framework and strong macroeconomic indicators are assets that call for deeper cooperation. Actually, one of the forthcoming issues in our cooperation is our 2023 vision, which aims at putting Turkey within the top 10 economies in the global economy, and I think our cooperation with the United States is going to be a key in realizing that objective. Maybe a point of, I mean, these are of course positive prospects and positive picture, but one idea is, for example, in May there has been almost $70 billion tenders in Turkey for the third bridge, for the airport, and for the second nuclear plant. But unfortunately, we didn't have any US company winning these tenders. I think that's somewhat telling that, I mean, there is ample ground, but we are not making the best use of that. So my call to our American friends and the American private sector is to focus more on Turkey and try to institutionalize the way we are cooperating in economy and commercial field.
Thank you. It's good to see that there are lots of similarities between this panel and the earlier panels, in the sense that you talked about the 2023 vision for Turkey. And in our multinational cooperation panel as well, it was mentioned a lot of American companies, when they are like planning their strategies in relation to Turkey, they say that they take this into account and they try to see how they might fit into this vision. So at least now, more of the American companies seem to be taking that into account, and so that's good news. My second question would be, you were very much following our Prime Minister's visit to the US in May, and as you know, one of the issues that came onto the agenda was this, in addition to the TTIP talks, it was also mentioned that Turkey is now willing to pursue a free trade agreement with the US. So how do you see this? What's your expectation about this for the future?
Actually, maybe I just didn't point to our Prime Minister's visit. I am still tired of that visit after 1 month. Maybe you are still tired because of that. It was really a historical and watershed visit, and we were very much satisfied with both the results and the reception we had here in Washington, D.C., both by the administration and by the State Department. TTIP it was a hot topic in Turkey, especially in April when Secretary Gabe visited Turkey and they had talks with Foreign Minister Davutoğlu. I think there is a growing understanding between what can happen, what are the objectives, and the idea is, I think there is a convergence that Turkey should not be left out. I mean, that's the important part. And I was also in the negotiations in the National Security Council to find a common way to go through. Actually, during the Prime Minister's visit, we have created a high-level committee which has a ultimate objective of preparing this relationship to the next level, which is the free trade level. I mean, why does TTIP is so important for Turkey? Turkey has been having a customs union with the European Union since 1996, and this customs union makes it obligatory for Turkey to apply a free trade regime to whoever the European Union signs a free trade agreement. So Turkey will be having a free trade agreement with the United States, but the United States will not be necessarily opening its own market to Turkey. So we say that, I mean, we don't want to be left out of this transatlantic free trade areas. And I think our American allies and our American partners have been very much receptive to the idea of integrating Turkey to this free trade area and having Turkey inside rather than leaving it outside. I think Turkey is not just asking for a free trade or kind of a beneficial regime from the United States. My perception, and I think this is the assessment by our American partners, is that Turkey also can contribute. It has assets, geo-economic assets, it has geocultural, geopolitical assets in the region, and Turkey can reach out to the region better than almost many countries. So I think it's going to be a mutually beneficial process if we can go through with this TTIP. But our political elites and our leadership is very much understanding that the United States' priority is to just start smoothly with a process with the European Union, and once it starts and it goes smoothly, we can proceed with the United States.
Thank you. Ambassador Holmes, as part of being president of American-Turkish Council, I think you have the advantage of, since you have both American and Turkish corporate members, you can kind of hear about what both members say, like Turks and Americans. So can you share with us a little bit about what you hear from them about the concerns they see as well as opportunities they see in terms of expanding trade relations between the two countries?
Be happy to. Thank you for the invitation. I love chocolate, but my chocolate tastes are not very sophisticated. I prefer M&Ms. Maryruth will remember that I kept on my table throughout my Foreign Service career a big bowl of M&Ms. Turkey has the world's 16th largest economy. The United States is the world's largest economy. I buy my M&Ms in a big package, three pounds. That's 1.5 kilos of a package. If I took that 1.5 kilos of M&Ms and dumped it all into one bowl, as I've done on several occasions, and out of that bowl of several thousand M&Ms, I picked out one M&M. That represents the total U.S.-Turkey trade relationship in comparison with the total global relationship for the United States and Turkey in the global economy. It's actually, we've overstated it by somewhat with that one M&M. That's an illustration in my mind of how vast the opportunity is for us to get more stuck in to each other's trade and investment relationship. when I meet with my members, whether they're Turkish or American, they all understand this. This is a matter of education, it's a matter of understanding, it's a matter of appreciation, it's a matter of taking advantage. But they all have some apprehensions, at least at some stage or another. If I ask the Turkish members, why don't we see more Turkish investment, or why don't we see more Turkish risk-taking in the American marketplace, they say to me, too big, too far, too big lots, you're looking for too much volume, and it scares us. If I say it to our American partners, they say, too risky. First of all, they say, I don't know much about Turkey, so it's an educational issue. Secondly, they say, too risky, and what they have in mind there is the 1980s and 1990s. They don't have in mind the political stability that Turkey's enjoyed for the last decade. They don't have in mind the 5% annual growth that Turkey's enjoyed for the last decade. They don't have in mind that Turkey and the United States have this excellent bilateral relationship on which you can build a lot. Nor do they have in mind that there are now government-to-government institutions being developed which are no longer just yak, yak, yak. We promised here, sign here, yeah, we'll do it next week, or we'll do it tomorrow, or we'll do it a year from now. Now they're getting stuck into how do you practically move these things along. So the education has to catch up with what's going on in a government-to-government basis, as well as the opportunities that exist on a private sector-to-private sector basis. That's the role of groups like the American-Turkish Council. It's the role of the embassy, whether it's the U.S. embassy or the Turkish embassy. It's also the role of the Department of Commerce. It's the role of Sule representing the legal advisors for the private sector. I mean, all of us, there's more than enough work for all of us to do in behalf of either or both the Turkish and American private sectors in order to get them energized, excited about, and knowledgeable about the opportunities that exist in each other's countries.
Thank you. And since we talked about TTIP and a possible free trade agreement, would you like to share with us your ideas whether Turkey should be concerned about a negative fallout from expected EU-US free trade negotiations?
I think Turkey is overly excited prematurely. There will be plenty of time to be excited later on.
It's going to take a while.
Right now, if Turkey pushes too hard, you're going to lose it. That's my advice. Why will you lose it? Because the United States hasn't even at this point gained the agreement from the Congress for the, I think we've still got 3 weeks or something to go before.
No.
Huh?
It's already been, yeah.
Obama declared it actually.
Yeah.
They have agreed?
Yeah.
They're going to start in July.
Yeah.
Well, talk about education, I got to start with myself here. Okay.
We are following closely.
Okay. Let's make the assumption that the agreement exists for the U.S. to start the negotiations with the European Union. If Turkey at this point pushes too hard for it to be included in parallel negotiations where no groundwork has been laid at all, apart from the President and the Prime Minister talking about it, but no practical groundwork has been laid in the U.S. Trade Representative's Office with Capitol Hill, et cetera, then Turkey will find itself left out in the cold. It's got to understand what the right time and the right place is, and to accept the word of the United States government that it will look out for Turkey's interests in the negotiations, will keep it informed, and that the administration will be supportive of a parallel or a comparable free trade agreement at the right time. But right now is not the right time. So I say relax, don't push too hard, give us a little bit of credibility and a little bit of trust that we will follow through to keep Turkey informed, and we'll give you the heads up that is necessary when it's time for us to say to you, yeah, now we think it's appropriate for us to push ahead with a free trade agreement. It's going to depend upon a lot upon success as far as US-EU negotiations are concerned, and that's not a slam dunk by any measure.
Okay, thanks for sharing your opinions. Sule, would you be able to share with us your views on what the strategies should be used in order to improve trade relations between the two countries?
Thank you, Neslihan. Thank you for the invitation. There are several possible strategies that can be applied to improve trade and investments between the US and Turkey. There is the government, there is the private sector. But the free trade agreement is definitely it. It will improve the trade most rapidly. We have seen this with many other countries, Jordan, Peru, Bahrain, Oman, Morocco. They all increased their export, needless to say, after signing the agreement. Turkey should be involved in the discussions concerning the negotiations of EU and US free trade area. Turkey, at the same time, should start the parallel FTA negotiations right away with the US. I'm sorry, Ambassador Holmes just said that there's no groundwork laid out yet, but I'm going to explain my points in a moment. Obviously, everyone knows that Turkey has a customs union agreement with the EU, and under that agreement, third country signing a free trade deal with the EU gets automatic access to the Turkish markets. But Turkey does not get the same reciprocal benefit for its exports. Deputy Prime Minister Ali Babacan estimates that Turkey may lose 2.5% of gross domestic product a year if it is left out. That means $20 billion a year. Turkey has a bitter experience with the latest FTAs that the EU signed with other countries. For instance, Malaysia, Vietnam, Singapore, Colombia, Peru, Japan. It is understandable that since Turkey is not a member of the EU yet, officially Turkey cannot have a say in the Council of Ministers, but it should be involved in the negotiations. The free trade agreement signed by the EU with other countries put Turkey at a disadvantage. Normally, when EU signs an agreement with other countries, they add a clause to the agreement for Turkey, indicating that those countries should also sign an agreement with Turkey. But in reality, this never happens. After the negotiations are over with the EU, these countries are reluctant to give the same terms and also unduly delay the process, which leads to unfair competition. So we don't want to let the same thing happen during the EU and US negotiations. Turkey cannot afford that any more than the US. Another strategy, that was the free trade agreement part. But I want to talk about the GSP program briefly. The other strategy is to improve the usage of the generalized system of preferences program. Genelleştirilmiş tercihler sistemi.
Would you be able to explain it in a few sentences? What
Sure,
it means exactly?
sure. U.S. Generalized System of Preferences program is one of the U.S. preferences programs, provides duty-free treatment to 127 countries for the approximately 3,500 products. This program is going to expire on July 31st of this year, unless it's extended. Extension is very important for Turkey since GSP benefits are claimed on approximately 20% of the Turkish exports. The generalized system of preferences is not fully utilized. Turkish companies need to be educated about the program. Out of 3,500 products that Turkey is eligible to export duty-free, Turkey only uses approximately 1,000 of its products. This effort to fully utilize the GSP system could be accomplished with a combined government and private sector initiative. For example, Turkey could educate companies more about the program. Turkish export associations, Chamber of Commerce's, Turkish American associations are vital to do that. Furthermore, they must organize more seminars, conferences, in order to inform Turkish firms. Also, the product coverage by the GSP can be expanded. That means additional products can be added to these 3,500 products. It's not a simple procedure, it takes time, but it is doable as well. And Turkish companies should be educated about this as well. I've got several other strategies, but I'm not sure if you want me to continue or should
maybe let's come back to it later if we have time, because I also want to have enough time for question and answers.
Sure.
But maybe as a second question, as a quick response, if you can share with us, since you also have this TOBB AmCham affiliation as well as you work with a lot of private sector organizations, if you can share with us what you think the private sector can play, what's the role for the private sector in order to improve the trade?
Sure.
Since you're so systematic,
Sure.
do you have also
I've got bullet
specific
points
number?
for you. Just boom, boom, boom. I'll
It's
tell
useful,
all
so
of them.
please share with us.
There are of course, other strategies that private sector can employ. First of all, a study should be conducted by the Turkish business organizations or export associations, TOBB, or Turkish Exporters Assembly, for instance, can do that. This study should identify Turkish products which are in high demand in the United States. This study also should pinpoint the difficulties Turkish companies face while exporting these specific products. Like Ambassador Holmes said, Turkish companies perceive U.S. is too far, first of all. To overcome logistics disadvantages, Turkish export associations can establish trade centers and warehouses in the United States. Another strategy is to match companies, of course, Turkish manufacturers and US companies. This can be done through US firms specialized in matching companies, as well as an organization can be set up. I named it like US-Turkey Commercial Institute. This can be headquartered in Ankara and also in Washington, D.C., with a mission to promote bilateral trade and investments through matching companies. Do you want me to continue or not? I have got
Let's
others.
come back to it later.
Yeah.
About the first point that you made, I think it was towards the end of 2009 that DEIC, for an Economic Relations Board, they did a study with the McKinsey company, did it for them, in fact, that they did survey a number of Turkish companies and asked what the obstacles are in terms of why their trade to the US is limited. And if you ask me afterwards, I'll be more than willing to send you the reports. And also another thing, you talked about these organizations playing a role in terms of more research. Also, one thing to mention is recently TOBB signed an MOU with the US Chamber of Commerce, and as part of that MOU, there are specific tasks that are done together, one of them being more like state-focused delegation visits both in Turkey as well as different city visits of the American companies in Turkey. But another aspect of it is doing a study together. And that study is mostly going to look at potential effects of a potential free trade agreement between Turkey and the US by paying specific focus on different sectors as well. So some action is done in that regard, so that the audience knows, and also other organizations are doing similar, some studies, not enough, but it's a start. For all the organizations. So If we move to our last speaker, I want to be able to give her enough time because U.S. Department of Commerce is doing a lot, of course, in terms of improving trade relations between the two countries. If you can, Kristen, mention like what the Commerce Department's role has been in this regard, and in your view, what are the concrete results? Were you able to see any concrete results of specific efforts, government efforts?
Thank you, Neslihan. Well, ever since President Obama went to Turkey in 2009 and pledged to elevate the commercial and economic relationship with Turkey to a more strategic level, we at Commerce have been extremely active, as have been all the other agencies, as Maryruth already mentioned. We've really made Turkey a priority for us. I work in an office that covers Central and Southeast Europe, which for the Department of Commerce includes Turkey plus 16 other countries, and none of them, as far as workload, compares to what we do on Turkey. We have almost 4 people working on Turkey full-time, and that's an increase from 1 person 3 years ago. So that's just to give you a sense of the amount of importance we place on the economic and commercial relationship. I'd like to briefly mention a little bit more about the FSEC, which was mentioned by a couple people. The Department of Commerce co-chairs it. It stands for the U.S.-Turkey Framework for Strategic Economic and Commercial Cooperation. It is the only cabinet-level dialogue we have with Turkey specifically on economic and commercial issues. And as Maryruth also mentioned, we don't have this with that many countries. So this is a really, really big deal. It's co-chaired by the Secretary of Commerce and the United States Trade Representative, as well as the Minister of Economy of Turkey and the Deputy Prime Minister Ali Babacan. The FSEC has met twice. The last meeting was about a year ago, so we're hoping to have another meeting perhaps this fall, but that has not been confirmed. Neither has our secretary been confirmed, nor the United States Trade Representative. So we're kind of waiting for that. Sorry, what did you say?
USTR confirmed.
Oh, see, I'm not educated on that. I missed that news, but we don't have the secretary yet. But the point of the FSEC really is to elevate the discussion and to bring certain issues to a ministerial level to hopefully move the needle on certain things. The other thing that Commerce has been very active on is the creation of the U.S.-Turkey Business Council, which was established in 2010. And the point of the U.S.-Turkey Business Council is to bring together U.S. and Turkish private sector representatives to make joint policy recommendations to the governments on what we should be doing to improve the trade and investment relationship. Now, having such a council puts Turkey in a pretty elite company. We don't have this, again, with very many countries. We've modeled it on something we have with Brazil and something we have with India. And there's very few of these. And we're very proud that we've made it work with Turkey. And so we really believe that to build a relationship, we have to listen to business. I mean, we governments can talk and we can try very hard and do these things. But the point is we have to hear it from the companies. And we want to know what U.S. and Turkish companies together feel really needs to be done to move the needle. So the first meeting of the council took place in 2011, and the council came up with specific recommendations of what we should be doing. And I'm pleased to say that we were able to implement some of these. First and foremost, the council recommended that our governments do more to coordinate with each other, and even amongst our own governments, among what are we doing on trade and investment. We have a lot of good things going on, but we don't always necessarily coordinate. And so out of that came the creation of the high-level coordinators who report to the FSEC. And the point of these coordinators is to do just that, to keep the dialogue going and to figure out where we're going on things. We also organized a defense and aerospace trade mission to Turkey that brought U.S. aerospace and defense companies to Turkey for matchmaking with Turkish companies, which was also a direct result of a council recommendation to do more in the aerospace and defense supply chain. And finally, we also organized a World Bank Ease of Doing Business symposium The Department of Commerce partnered with the Ministry of Economy and ISBAT and the World Bank to put on a symposium to address legislative and regulatory predictability issues, which was also brought up by the Council. So these are just a few of the things on which we have been working, and we will continue to do so with the Council. I also want to briefly mention Select USA. Select USA is an office in the Department of Commerce which specifically exists to help foreign investors that are looking to do business in the United States. And this addresses the issue of, Turkish investors saying, the US is too far, it's too complicated. And, it's a valid point because we have a federal system. And so each state has its own way of attracting investment, and it can get confusing. But Select USA is kind of a central clearinghouse. It's kind of a first stop. And so any companies that are interested in the US market can go to Select USA, and Select USA can help guide them into the US market. So I just wanted to throw that out there. And in terms of results that we've seen, I know a few of my colleagues up here have mentioned it already, but we've had some very good trade numbers, and it can always be better. I mean, I think we all agree on that. We want it to be better, we want it to be more, but we've seen some positive momentum here. We've seen increase in investment, and we've also seen an uptick in successful joint ventures between US and Turkish firms, and they are making innovative products in Turkey for both domestic production and export to third markets. And that's the kind of collaboration that we really want to see.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And since we talked so much about TTIP, I'm also curious to hear your views, like the commerce's position on this issue, if you can elaborate a bit.
Thank you. Well, first of all, when the Prime Minister was in Washington last month, the President made it clear that we understand the Turkish concern about the consequences of TTIP on Turkey. So I think as an administration, we all completely understand where Turkey is coming from. He also shared with the Prime Minister that we have very high ambitions for the TTIP. I mean, this is supposed to really raise the bar for how we negotiate these types of agreements, and negotiating especially the regulatory and standard side of things between the two largest economies, will certainly, I think, change the model a little bit. So we certainly don't want Turkey to be left behind, but we feel strongly that there's still some work to be done before we go down that path, similar to what Jim said. I'd like to kind of echo what Ambassador Holmes said. And because of that, I think, is the President, the Prime Minister agreed to the creation of this high-level committee. And yes, we still have to figure out exactly who's leading it, when it's meeting, and a lot of that was dependent upon the USTR appointment and other things, and so I'm sure maybe things will start moving a little bit. But really the point of the committee, which is associated with the FSEC, is to share information. So as the TTIP negotiations are underway, the high-level committee is supposed to inform Turkey on what is happening, but also keep working on our bilateral trade and investment issues that we have. And there are some underlying issues that we've talked about in various dialogues, and in this committee we will continue that discussion. And I think if we can decide to keep working on these, we will inspire greater confidence amongst our businesses, and we will show that there's a foundation for future collaboration in that regard. And so that's what we're hoping right now, is to make progress on issues that we've been working on as part of the committee, and then see where we go with TTIP, which, as Jim said, is also not a foregone conclusion, and then address it later.
Okay, thank you. So we have around 10 minutes for questions and answers. If any of the audience have any questions for our panelists. Maybe in order to set the tone, I'll start by asking Ambassador Holmes another question. Ambassador Holmes, as you know, there are lots of different multiple high-level government instruments for promoting U.S.-Turkey trade and relationship. And Turkey has many business organizations, not just in D.C., but also in other cities like in New York and others, with its own offices and representation. Do you see this as like an advantage or a disadvantage in terms of Turkey's efforts to promote trade and investment in the U.S.?
I think it's a case of you are where you sit. If you're looking on the outside and saying, I need somebody to help me, and you start looking, when you see 12 organizations in Washington, 6 more in New York, etc., each one says, we're here, we're prepared to be helpful, you can be confused. In reality, I think that there's enough work for all of us. And therefore, from the American-Turkish Council's perspective, we're prepared to work with any and all of these organizations as long as they're committed to the promotion of trade and investment. And so I think that the answer is it should not be a problem. If you will turn to one or another organization and ask them to help you to understand what might be confusing, they'll be happy to do it. And then a good organization will move from talking to practical moves. What do you need? What is it that you want to do? And tell me how you'd like us to be helpful, and I can tell you whether we can do it or not. That's the way to move from a discussion of theoretics and confusion to one of practical assistance. And I think that you'll find multiple organizations who are prepared to say yes, yes, yes to all those questions.
Okay, sounds good.
There's a question.
Yes, we have a question.
Hi, my name is Romulo Cabeza. I'm with Sandler Trade. I had 2 brief questions that I wanted to ask. Ambassador Holmes, you stressed that Turkey should be patient, that there's an element of patience. I just wanted to know what are the milestones that Turkey should be patient for, and also in response to Councillor Emirhan's previous concerns, how can Turkey be reassured that the issues of being left behind in other previous FTAs that the EU has proceeded with, how can Turkey be assured that this won't happen again?
Well, I think it's really a matter of tactics. I don't think that there's any disagreement in terms of the strategy. The United States government, including when the Prime Minister was here, acknowledged that the way the setup exists between Turkey and the European Union now is a potential disadvantage for Turkey that they need to be alert to, and we, as a trading partner, need to be alert to as well. The promise was that we will be, and we will keep you informed, and we will not work to your disadvantage in this process. The risk here is sowing confusion. For example, Turkey going up to Capitol Hill, and before anything is even nailed down as far as the European Union is concerned, begin to try to explain how difficult it is for Turkey, and therefore try to get the focus shifted from EU-US to US-Turkey. That would be a tactical as well as a strategic mistake. So I say, a little bit of trust, a little bit of confidence, let the process work, let the council, which has been set up, or the commission, which has been set up to exchange information, let that begin to work, and to provide a reassurance in this regard, and not get yourselves worked up into a lather that something bad is going to happen before it does.
If any of our other panelists want to also contribute. Yeah.
I think it has been beyond a matter of being patient or not. I mean, now we have seen the approach the U.S. administration has about this. I mean, especially in the early stages, our leadership was very much kind of apprehensive about what is going on. Now that they have seen that there is a willingness on the U.S. administration, and with this high-level committee, I think things pretty much have settled down for good. And I think we shouldn't miss a point. I mean, this is not just about a trade relationship. It is about Turkey's Western orientation. I mean, Turkey has been very much pleased about the U.S. support of Turkey's EU integration. I mean, I remember in 1999, before the Helsinki summit, President Clinton was very much supportive, and he made sure that the Europeans didn't miss a chance to make Turkey a candidate state. And again in 2005, the US kind of acknowledgement and US encouragement of the European partners was very much key in setting the score, I should say. And with this thing, I mean, this is not about just free trade. Maybe a free trade agreement with the United States would not benefit Turkey that much. Even it would be costly, because we are entering into a economic liberalizing trade relationship with a giant economy. Turkey is not a giant economy, it's a developing economy. So, I mean, we shouldn't just think this in a material kind of calculus way of thinking. It is more than a rational choice theory. It is about identity, it is about the perception of Turkey as being in the West. And I think TTIP is gonna ensure that Turkey has a Western anchor in its not just economic policy, but also its foreign policy.
Yes, please.
Hi, Larry Sperling from State Department's Global Partnership Initiative. Very interesting conversation. I'm wondering if any of the panelists would comment on the potential for Turkey's leadership, both on commercial relations and investment, but more broadly in terms of serving as a bridge between the West and particularly the Middle East.
Sure.
Yes, well, let me just make a couple of quick comments. I know that part of our dialogue has focused on how to work productively in the new MENA states, and basically we don't have always the ground knowledge, and Turks have a lot of knowledge of businesses and conditions. We feel that there's a huge need for employment, for investment, and so we feel that that kind of partnership could be very rich. And we've also seen that Turkey has been giving foreign aid to Egypt and also other African countries. And we also have a big dialogue with the EU, how best to foster dialogue, development, how best to connect government, private sector, and the forces from within the receiving country to make the most effective development. So we have tried to work more with Turkey on that. It is an emerging donor country, so this is exciting. And, but everyone has to kind of think through their goals and how they achieve it. Every day, new thoughts and theories are coming to the fore. So I look forward to more work with Turkey on this.
I think Turkey's predicament, especially for today, is we are in the middle of crisis. I mean, on our west, there's a financial crisis and recession. On our east, there is political and social crisis. I mean, the idea of a bridge is good, but I mean, what do you want to connect? I mean, you don't connect like two crises. So, I mean, our hope and our kind of pray maybe is that, you know, this crisis is not going to affect Turkey. And my belief is in the short term, or maybe in the medium term, both the European partners and the United States would be much more forthcoming. And in that sense, Turkey can fulfill its potential to connect, not bridge, but connect these two kind of interconnected regions. Actually, I mean, in mid-2000s, the EU had a very good kind of policy of neighborhood policy towards North Africa and Syria, for example, and Levant. It had certain effects. I mean, it was at least a positive message to the region, saying that, you know, we can cooperate. We are not separate. But today we don't have that understanding between these regions. And in the Middle East, people think that they are deserted. They are alone with their own crisis. And Europe is very much insular these days, and they are trying to tackle their own problems. So once we get rid of this kind of gloomy kind of picture, I think Turkey's role will be much more powerful.
Yeah, I just briefly mention something that I'm hearing increasingly from American companies. American companies who 2 years, 3 years ago were talking about Abu Dhabi and the Gulf states, and yeah, we've got a regional office there, and we're going to work in Eurasia, we're going to work in the Middle East and so on out of our Abu Dhabi offices. I'm hearing more and more now talking about Turkey. I have, in the last trip, ran into three companies, three substantial American companies who were making a switch, a change, to operate out of Turkey regionally. It's a function of THY Airlines. It's a function of 10 years of political stability. Let's hope that Standing Man contributes to that. The fact of the matter is that Turkey is gradually, over time, is asserting itself in a way, in a regional way, which American companies were up until now hesitant to do, and now are seeing the values, the practical values of Turkey as the bridge, the hub that you're speaking about.
It's again good to see similar teams coming up. We mentioned about this Turkey versus some of the Gulf countries in terms of transportation, being a transportation and logistics hub. So it's good to see teams repeated up. We have two more questions, limited time. Maybe we will take both questions one after another, and then our panelists can respond. Please.
Thank you. Rob Colorina, AIAC Investment. It's great that you guys are doing this, and All World, I've worked with them in Africa. My question is on metrics. Can someone share how many companies are listed companies with Turkish domain, and in the last 3 years, if there's been any public IPOs out of that batch?
IPOs, did you say?
In logistics.
And maybe we will also take the second question. Or last three questions. Please go ahead.
Thank you very much. My name is Lisa. I work for ESIP, think tank in Brussels. I have a question regarding the GSP provisions. You mentioned that they were going to expire at the end of 2014. Are they likely to be renewed, or how does it usually work? Is it something that is renewed annually, or?
It's not always annually, but sometimes 2 years. It depends. Generally, it's been renewed annually in the past, but the last renewal happened 2 years ago. I mean, last time, yes, it's been renewed 2 years ago. Now it's going to be expired in July 31st of this year.
I was
And
also
I
curious to
should
hear if
maybe ask the
textiles.
question to others in the panels. Do you think that it's going to be expanded, or I mean, like renewed this year on July 31st?
Did you wanna? Do you have a second part of the question?
A second part of the question was if textiles benefit from the GSP provisions.
I can't hear you.
If textiles are part of the GSP.
No, generally speaking, no.
And can we also take the third question?
Celal Seçilmiş, Turkish American Chamber of Commerce and Industry. I want to go back to the free trade agreement question. All the panelists agreed that there's willingness on the part of American government. Given the fact that we know there's a procedure that has to be followed, Commission, House, and Senate, do you think just the willingness on the part of the government is enough for a successful result?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think, I think we would hope so. I mean, at this point, I think we have shown already by the fact that the President and the Prime Minister agreed to this committee publicly that there is a great deal of will. And I think it's a matter of seeing how it plays out. I think right now the goodwill is there, and we want to move forward with the committee. The committee has to meet. And I think after that, we just hope that, the momentum continues. But I definitely say right now at this time, there is a lot of will to communicate, to inform, and to keep each other apprised of what's happening. I don't know if anybody else wants to.
Well, I just add to that, government goodwill is not enough. You need a positive vote in both houses. And even in the case of the U.S.-EU agreement, I don't think the administration takes this as a foregone conclusion. I think they feel that they've got a lot of work to do to convince a reluctant House and Senate, perhaps more House than Senate, to adopt and absorb this. And that has to be successful before you can expect to be successful with the U.S.-Turkey free trade agreement.
Any comments on the first question? It's a very specific one, but
The listing of
I guess that's
I don't have
too
the
specific
answer.
to answer for this panel.
You've stumped us.
I didn't study that part. Maybe to add to this political willingness part, I mean, I sometimes feel kind of sorry about the idea that the U.S.-Turkish economic relationship is, there is also a political side of this. I mean, what I mean, for example, the U.S. sanctions against Iran. I mean, Turkey-Iran relationship is like 20 billion now. And Iran is in a very precarious situation. And Turkey is unilaterally applying the U.S. sanctions to Iran. So our trade volume with Iran could have increased, but we don't increase our trade volume at the expense of our relations with the United States. So I think the U.S.-Turkey relationship is not just about Turkey itself. I mean, for example, in the 1990s, we know that Iraq was sanctioned, and it affected Turkey too much. Now Iran is sanctioned, it is affecting us too much. I think we need to have a bigger perspective in Washington to understand what Turkey is and what Turkey means for the United States. And Turkish compliance with Iran has been very crucial in just kind of changing things in Iran. So I think there is a bigger discussion there, and it is not just about a bilateral relationship, but maybe a bilateral relationship affecting the overall region. So I mean, the political will is also kind of going to reflect itself in the Congress and in the U.S. public opinion if we can use these arguments that we haven't yet, and we don't want to use them, you know, in the short term. But I mean, U.S.-Turkey relationship is also a policy tool for the United States, and we have to acknowledge this.
We're already out of time, so I want to thank our panelists and for taking the time to be here. And if there are any other questions, please feel free to find our panelists during the breaks. And also don't forget that today at 5:30, our ambassador is hosting us. He's kind enough to host us in his residence. Not to confuse with the embassy. Don't go to the embassy. And the map is provided in the folder. So thank you for being here.